Hawks Nation, what is going on? Welcome to another edition of the HawksFanTV podcast. I'm your host, Mac, and here with my permanent co-host at this point, HawksFanTV AJ. Can't believe we both have a smile on our faces. We're saying that. It's hard to smile as a Hawks fan these days, but at least the weather's getting nicer. At least it's warming up a little bit. But yeah, man, things. I can't say they're rough because it has to be expected to a degree. I mean, did we really think that we were going to take down the Boston Celtics in a 7-game series? I'm sure there was some hope and some legitimate optimism behind people saying things like that, but reality's got to set in at some point, and you got to accept that it just kind of is what it is. So yeah, man, we'll recap both games 3 and 4. Game 3, that's going to be the fun one to recap. That was a great game. AJ, you were there actually with Alex as well, so we had nice Hawks Fan TV representation in the house. And Hawks pulled off the win, man. It was pretty cool. Obviously it was pretty cool, but it was awesome to see how lit the building was. The crowd played a huge role into it. I don't think anybody could deny that. So glad you guys were able to make it. But yeah, man, I'd love to hear your point of view and perspective of game 3 and what the crowd felt like, even pregame and everything, because I can imagine the energy was pretty high.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the first thing I'll point to. It wasn't a normal Hawks game, because we do have a rap for either whether you want to say we show up or don't wear our team colors or we show up late. Atlanta, I'm sorry, I've been watching the team for 20 years, and that is pretty freaking true. Friday was not the case. It was awesome. The atmosphere was crazy. You had people cheering on every possession, it seemed. You had defensive possessions that people were cheering on, getting into. When someone would make that time, it's almost like when the timely basket was made, you felt the crowd almost energize the player to get to that moment, So in regards to the energy, I mean, it was terrific. One thing that I would like to bring up, I don't know why they chose to go with a blackout against the Celtics. I think we should have probably done a red out. I think that would have combated the green in there a little bit better. But again, on Friday, there actually it looked like a lot more Hawks fans in there instead of a Boston Celtics contingency, which is a good start in my opinion. Now, getting to the actual game, they just played their brand of basketball, the Hawks basketball that we want to see, that everyone wants to see on a consistent basis. And that's, the number 2 scoring offense in, the NBA, and a serviceable defense, much to our Falcons or Braves, a bend don't break defense, and that's how they played game 3. The shots were going, 3-point wise, the Celtics actually ended up hitting a couple more threes than us, but we were hitting ours at a more efficient clip. I think they hit 21, we hit 15, but again, we hit ours at, a 44% rate, which is pretty good in the National Basketball League. But, we got a big game out of Trey. We got a big game out of Dejounte. Why we bought Dejounte in here, to have guys. I'm sure you've seen the statistic already. It's the first time in franchise history that 2 players had 20 plus points, 5 plus rebounds, 5 plus assists. So, which they actually did replicate again in game 4, albeit in a loss. So game 3 was it was fantastic, man. It was, the energy was there. The team showed up, and, it's just, for me, kind of comparing it to yesterday, because I watched yesterday's game from start to finish. It was back to the same old Hawks. We had empty seats by the, halfway through the first quarter. Crowd didn't really seem into it. And once Boston got going, it took the crowd out of it even more. And, it's the Hawks were just playing from behind the whole time. They were chasing instead of, being the aggressor that they were on Friday.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Friday, they definitely were the aggressor. It was, the opposite of game 4, where it felt like the Hawks would be up by 7, Boston would answer a little bit, but then the Hawks would go on another run, where it was just like the Hawks had an answer for everything for Boston. And Boston definitely had the opposite for game 4. I'll get into that a little bit later. But, game 3, as you said, the energy was high, and it's Malcolm Brogdon kind of spoke on it, and it's it's an unfortunate truth, but you kind of said it, and it is true. Atlanta Hawks fans haven't been known as the most passionate and diehard fan base out there, selling out every single game, doesn't matter the team success or not. So it was. I even tweeted out from my account. There was some unfortunate truth behind what he was saying, but it couldn't be further from the reality on Friday, game 3, and I think even the last couple seasons. This season the Hawks were second in percentage attendance in the NBA behind Dallas, and I got to admit, when you're competing with the Braves and the Falcons weren't any good this year, but this is still a city that loves the Falcons probably more than any other team in the city. point being is that when you're competing with both of those teams for viewership and whatever it may be, I think it's impressive that the Hawks were able to get that high of attendance this year. And it's I think you can almost directly correlate that to the signing of Dejounte Murray. I think bringing in that second star made people, myself included, really think that this season was going to be quite a difference for the Atlanta Hawks. And I got to admit, I'm definitely a little glad that it's almost over. But Game 3 was fun. Game 3 was definitely fun. Obviously, you got Trey dropping 32, Dejounte dropping 25. Bench mob went off. There's the whole old mantra in the NBA: the role players play better at home. Well, they certainly did in Game 3. I want to say they had. Well, I'm looking at it now. They had 44 points combined. Man, I mean that's a ton off the bench. So getting that heavy of contribution from the bench. You've seen Onyeka and Bogey joke in games past, say, we got the best bench in the NBA. And sometimes you can actually argue that maybe they are. But then Game 4, and this will, I guess, be kind of my segue into Game 4. Game 4, it just wasn't the same deal, man. It was actually the opposite. It was the Celtics bench that was stepping up. It was Malcolm Brogdon. It was Derek White. It was, at times Marcus Smart was making circus shots, which, that guy's got to be, at this point, one of the more frustrating players in the entire NBA if you're not a fan of the Celtics. I think probably even Celtics fans don't like the guy at points. So, but it's Game 4. I was saying off air before we started recording that I wasn't necessarily disappointed with the effort. I wasn't disappointed with really the production, except for one person, John Collins. We'll get to that in a second. It's just I'm sitting there watching it at home, watching it with my fiance, and she's a huge Hawks fan at this point now too. And we both said it almost the exact same time. It's like, they're just a better team. It just, every time we would go on a little bit of run, there were times where we had the lead as low as, I want to say 3 or 4 points. And then the Celtics would go on a 10-0 run and it would just be back to double digits. And gosh, I'll say this, man, Jason Tatum, I'm jealous of you Celtics fans and you Dukies out there, because that dude is a freak, man. To be able to do what you can do at 6'8", and that size with that skill set, I don't know. Jason Tatum is a baller of all ballers. He's definitely a top 5 player in the league in my mind. So, with that being said, he's a top 5 player, man. You're not going to stop that guy. He's going to get his 25 plus points, his 10 plus boards, his 6, 7 plus assists. Like, he's going to make a huge impact on the game no matter what. So, and in Game 4 too, Jaylen Brown, I feel like we kind of slowed him down for Game 2 and Game 3. I want to say he scored in the teens in both of those games, and then Game 4. Bro drops 31 points, takes off his mask. And I knew it, man. When he took off that mask, I literally was like, oh, my God, he's about to go off. He went 11-15, probably, I think it was like 24 points after that. It's not fun. So, and again, I'm really kind of highlighting that because it's just the idea of that, I think this was a series where, as a Hawks fan and as a huge Trae Young fan, if I could show you all my Trae Young merch, you wouldn't even believe it. But I got to hang my head a little bit and just be like, man, these guys are just better than our 2 guys at this point. I say at this point because I'm not saying that Trey and Dejounte can never get there. I have full faith that they can. But right now in their careers, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are just on a different level. So, but yeah, man, it's Game 4. It was definitely a heartbreaker. It was a must win for the Hawks. I think this series is probably over now. Emphasis on it being over. But yeah, man, Game 4, I don't want to hang my head too low. You know what I mean? It was a hard fought battle, and the better team won. So,
Yeah, and you pointed to some of those contributions. Again, a guy that we didn't mention, Robert Williams, comes off and puts a double-double essentially in the second quarter. That's something that can't be understated. Trey, we're watching, as I'm watching the game, he's putting great effort. He gets that steal. I think it's on Marcus Smart or Jason Tatum. I forgot who it was. Kind of the wraparound steal. So, he's locked in defensively, which you could tell the guys are playing. No one's not playing. Trey actually said in his post-game presser, he felt that they were just as, or if not more aggressive than they were in Game 3. Sometimes the shots don't fall. He said he was comfortable with a lot of the shots that his teammates and him took. They just didn't fall. And it's hard because, yes, I do want to say, and it's not a doubt, the Celtics are clear head and shoulders better than us, but if the Hawks just hit a couple shots in some of these games, a lot of the complexion and how the game breaks down is just different. And it seemed like in Game 4, much like I'd even relate it a little bit of Game 1, they're within striking distance. They need to get that basket. They need to get that stop. They need to hit a three. They just need one thing that's going to turn this game upside down, and they just never got it. Yesterday, like you mentioned, we cut the lead down to 3 points, and from then on, they go on a 10-0 run right after, which is, obviously you don't want to be playing from behind because that creates more of a hole and you're putting in more effort. So it's hard to stay. But at the same point, if the Hawks just Mac, I really wish I had an answer for you, buddy. It's just frustrating. It's been like this all year. I'd even go back to say it's been like this even last year. It's a very similar story. So, I am not in the camp. I do want to, I know we're going to talk about later, but I'm not trying to blow this team up in regards to Trey. I mean, the guy's in categories with Michael Jordan and LeBron this early in his career in certain categories. So I realize the potential he has, but there's just stuff from this game that I watched where it was like, man, it's time to move on from some of these pieces, man. It's just not working. It almost kind of gets you back in that mold of the late 2000s where the Hawks were making the playoffs, they were winning, but what were they doing? First round exit, second round exit. The one time they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, they get swept. So, it's kind of going back to that franchise argument that we've always had is, are we going to be okay with consistently making the playoffs with a superstar player like Trae Young, or are we really going to go for it? Are we really going to put in the chips to go after a title, which involves risk, it involves signings, involves trades, involves drafting well, and it's losses like this on a must-win game just bring up all those ugly things that I wish we weren't talking about today, and more so talking about an important Game 5 that we have coming up tomorrow, but. It just so happens, like you said, it's tough to come back down 3-1 against a team that is, on paper and I think on the court has been better than the Hawks. So it's just tough, man. It's tough.
Oh yeah, no, man. You said a couple points that made me think of a couple things. You mentioned that Trey's a superstar player, and like, are we okay with just maybe a second round exit out of the playoffs every year here and there, and having that, and that I'll tell you, to be completely honest, most people that would be watching us are of age that would see this guy's entire career, but it makes me terrified that it could be a Damian Lillard.
Yeah,
I mean, absolutely. Like it's just one of those where we gotta get it together. But I have faith we will. I have faith we will. And again, something that you said that you're saying you don't want to really see the team blown up. I don't want to see it blown up either because we definitely need to keep Trae Young. We need to keep Onyeka. We need to keep Jalen Johnson. We need to keep AJ Griffin. We need to keep Dejounte. I personally don't even think you need to get rid of Bogey. I think when he comes off the bench and is actually playing well, like you have to understand Bogey is a bench player. So he's not going to perform like a starter because if he did, he'd be a starter.
He'd be a starter, absolutely.
Exactly. So I'm just saying, like, you got to, temper your expectations a little bit. But I'll tell you one guy we can get rid of. And you mentioned early 2000s Hawks. He's basically a poor man's Josh Smith. So we can definitely get rid of John Collins at this point, man. John, if you ever hear this, I think you're an incredible man. And I am genuinely hoping the best for you. I don't know where you'll end up going, but I do hope you end up somewhere where you're competing for a championship. Hey, maybe we can even see you in the finals, my friend. But I think at this point, I mentioned it earlier on the podcast, a few months ago, when the trade rumors started swirling up again. I said to Alex, because he was on the episode with me at that time, I was like, dude, I just think we've forgotten the human element with how many trade rumors are happening with John Collins every single year. And I just think it's apparent at this point. I mean, I'm looking at his numbers right now. 5 for 7 in game 1, 2 for 11 in game 2, 3 for 7 in game 3, 1 for 9 yesterday. That's horrible, man. I mean, obviously 5 for 7 isn't terrible, but the other 3 are horrible. And I don't want to believe, and I don't believe that it's because the dude has just become a bum and just, it's like Space Jam and he got his his
power zapped. Yeah, exactly.
Power zapped from him. It's like, no, man, the dude's still a baller. He doesn't want to be in Atlanta anymore, man. I don't think his heart is in it anymore. I think it took a toll on him. How often? I mean, the example I used when I was saying it to Alex way back when was like, imagine your boss comes up to you every few months and is like, hey, man, you might be moved over to the West Coast in a month or so, but we still love you. We're still going to keep you around. Like, it's got to be confusing. It's got to weigh on you. So point being is that, I hear a lot of John Collins slander, and I'm laughing because it's not necessarily not deserved. I mean, he hasn't played well, and I'm sure dudes at his level, and as long as they've been doing it, understand that that's part of it, man. You're going to face criticism. It's just part of it. So I don't think it probably bothers him too much, but I will say there has been some people where I'm like, oh, hold on, man. Don't say that about John. I'm like, John's still a good guy. I just don't think, I think one of those mutually parting ways. I think it's a lot of times that's said. I don't feel like it actually is mutual. I feel like this is a time where it would actually be mutual, where both sides are just like, hey, I think it'd be best for you guys, best for me if I kind of go ahead and move on. Because, it was said on the space after the game last night a ton, and it's true. Out of your starting four in a game 4 down 2-1 in the playoffs, 5 points. It's just, you can't have that, man. You can't have it. So we'll get into who we want to trade later towards the end of the episode, but I'm obviously saying right now John Collins is my number one. But with that being said, again, I do want to reiterate, I don't hate this guy. I got his jersey. I bought the shirt when he dunked on Embiid just on it. Like, I'm just saying, like, I'm a John Collins guy, man. But at the end of the day, it's, we were saying off air, and I laugh as I say because it is funny, but like, man, we gotta switch some things up, man. Because I'm not wishing anybody, bad wherever they go. But it's like I was saying to my fiance, it's like we're watching this TV show. And the first 3 seasons of it were great. They were awesome, but the characters are just stale. The storylines aren't really moving anymore. But they're still whatever world this show is in.
For sure.
Point being is that it's like we just need new characters, man. We just need some fresh faces. So
no, and I don't disagree. And I'll be the first to say, I'm just sad to see what's happened to John. He was such a fan favorite. He was such a great player. We've seen what he can do when he's at, the highest level. And Mac, I got to agree with you. I think it's 100% the external noise that's affected him. First, we want to go through the history, right? He first had a stumbling block coming to his sophomore year. He got suspended for the PED. So he's kind of in the news there, right? Then, getting criticism from that regard, not being prepared for the season, putting your team behind the 8 ball. Then, you hear that offseason, he comes out, him and Trey are infighting, So now there's this whole narrative that him and Trey don't get along. So now they're addressing that the whole time. Then you have trade rumor, and I believe I'm looking at, so it's 2020 to 21. Then you got trade rumors again in 21, 22. You had trade rumors again 22, 23. To go back to your analogy, to hear that, if your boss came up to you every day and said, hey, I may fire you, but I don't know, we'll see. We'll just see what the market bears. That's right. It does get tough, man. And I honestly, I cannot see how that doesn't affect him. He says all the right things. He does all the correct things. Let's not mention, he does have that jacked up middle finger, which right. I know he says doesn't affect his shooting, but based on what we saw this year, he had career lows across the board in all his shooting splits. So I don't know if it's from that or, again, the confidence. But one thing I saw in game 4 last night that just led me to be like, yeah, John's time is done here. He's guarding a guy one-on-one. And if you've ever played basketball, I never played at a high level, but even when you don't have your confidence going, you can even tell it on your defense. He's guarding this guy, and he looked like he's on skates. And John's a pretty solid defender when it comes to that, especially on one-on-one, but he just looked all out of sorts, which is telling me that he's thinking too much, which is telling me that it's just not conducive to winning basketball. So if he's played his last game here at Atlanta, albeit tomorrow, or if we push it to a game 6, I wish him the best. I really do. Like you said, he's been a class act. He's a community guy, a great person. But I'll even, one more point I add in there is just, even the Trey connection hasn't been this year. With the first couple of years, him and Trey were connecting on lobs, almost like Clint Capella. He had Clint and he had John. I only see Clint Capella these days. We don't even see John on the receiving end of those, which really is worrisome because his game does rely a bit on athleticism as well. So, again, it's just hard to put an argument for a guy that had, I'm looking at it now, career lows in points. We're excluding his rookie year. Career lows in points, career lows in assists, career lows in rebounds, career lows in free throw percentage and field goal percentage, 3-point. He shot 29% for 3 this year. I think I could do that. 29% is not. That's not even college.
Yeah, probably.
that is not even college basketball worthy, to be shooting 29%. So especially for a guy that moved his game to the perimeter. So right. I just think the whole situation's sad. I hate that it came to that. I viewed him as a pillar when we gave him that contract, and it looks like the people that were kind of advocating for that are the ones eating their words now. But it's just a sad kind of went the opposite way of progression. Went to regression. In the case of John Collins, man.
And look, man, I just got this. I know the way the podcast is released, it won't necessarily be breaking news for anybody that hears, but breaking news, Dejounte Murray suspended 1 game without pay for making inappropriate contact with an official at the end of game 4. So I got to admit, no Dejounte.
It's not looking good, dude.
That's a loss. That's a loss. That's okay. The season probably needs to end anyways. Real quick, I didn't plan on talking about the Dejounte bump. I know it's something that, we probably should have talked about. Now we'll talk about it real quick. You can't do things like that. As much as I hate it, I've use this analogy when I've talked about Trey yapping with the referees previously in the season. It's like arguing with a cop that's pulled you over. Like you're not going to win, man. It doesn't. I don't understand what players in any sport, like soccer, basketball, football, in any sport, think that they're going to do. I know that there are the occasional LeBrons and Tom Brady's that get away with it, but I don't know if you guys realize they're the greatest athletes ever in their respective sports, so don't expect to get the same treatment. Anyways, it's just you just can't do things like that. I know it was emotions are high. He didn't feel like the refs called a fair game. I was honestly, I'm sitting there watching at home. It's the Trey technical foul. I mean, not technical, the flagrant one on Jason Tatum. He pulls him down, and I saw it live. Jason Tatum hops up and he pushes the referee out of the way. He's trying to get to another referee to be like, "Yo, why the hell did you not call that?" But it's just one of those where it's hard visually, the optics of it, to see the star player on one team physically move or push, whatever term you want to use for it, a referee in an act of anger, in an act of, retaliation or whatever you want to call it. Then the Hawks player does it. And sure enough, Dejounte gets suspended. Now, don't get me wrong, Jason Tatum, they could announce it, but I would figure they would announce him at the same time. And I would think the announcement would be both Dejounte and Jason Tatum are suspended for game 5, which obviously that didn't happen. I think it's just one of those where, it's like the Jordan rules. You know what I mean? It's just one of those where it's like, look, man, it's the star players are going to get preferential treatment. And, I don't know. It sucks, man. That's obviously it's breaking news. I don't really know how to fully process it, but feels like that's a little unfair, but it is what it is, man.
No, and I'm going to go right back to you because I'll agree. I mean, Dejounte should be suspended. I'm going to tell you, if some dude came to me in the club, how he did to that ref, yeah, we're fighting. Like, I'm not letting you come up to me like that. You know what I mean? So I get why he's suspended. Again, I'm wholeheartedly agree. I mean, Jason Tatum literally put his hands on an official. I don't care what the reasoning or what he was trying to do. You moved an official out of the way. That is, I think, means a suspension. So in that regard, we'll see what happens, I guess, in the next couple hours. Maybe he'll get announced too. But, I feel like that's just a perfect example of the NBA's two-way street. If the Celtics don't get, the small market team gets punished, big market team, nothing happens, just wiped off. But that's just the NBA, just how it is. And, I do want to touch on that flagrant foul call. I cannot believe, that was just hard to watch, man. The guys, no one was trying to fall. If anything, Jason Tatum did worse by falling the way he did. I mean, they pulled his arm down, which is what they tell you to do when you have guys going there, So again, the whole situation, all that stuff. I mean, I think both Tatum and Murray should be suspended. And then, I never agreed with the flagrant call there on Trey. I'm actually surprised they didn't call it a 2 with the way somehow these refs call some of that stuff, but I'm glad they didn't eject Trey for that one.
No, I agree. Hard foul, obviously, but I think exactly that. Just a hard foul, man. It's just,
I mean, I just want to ask you, what do they want him to do? Do they want Trey to take him out in the air? Do they want Clint Capella to come over and completely take him out of the air? I mean, I think that's the best thing you could have done for a guy. And I don't know.
And you're right.
It's a different level of basketball
that makes it look way more dramatic, for lack of a better term. So yeah, it is what it is.
Man, that does take the wind out of the sails a little bit though for game 5. That news, I can't lie. I mean, I was kind of prepping. I'm kind of prepping for it, but yeah, that's that might be the nail in the coffin right there, buddy boy.
Yeah, that might be it. Yeah. Well, hey, on that note, please listen to the following message we got from our guys over at Firmament.
When you need quick, effective, and accurate data cabling services, call Firmament Solutions. We care about your network infrastructure. Our services are white-labeled, so you get the contracts. We provide the services. Our expertise includes low-voltage communication, networking, electrical, physical security, and life safety equipment. We're industry leaders, providing 24-hour service coverage. So we ask, when is the best time to have one of our certified technicians assist you?
All right. Thank you guys for that. We love our guys over at Firminen. As always, thank you guys for what you're doing. So yeah, we'll wrap the episode up on this. As I mentioned a little bit prior in the episode, really just going to kind of talk about who we would want to see moved in the offseason, if anyone. But like I said off air, I can't imagine there's no one you'd want to see moved at this point, or at least have a different role. You know what I mean? So I'll say for my two, one of them, obviously John Collins. I won't really go too much more on that. We kind of already touched base on all that stuff. The other one, this one kind of sucks to say because he had an incredible game last night. But I do think the consistency for me isn't there. And I'm sorry, Tim. Tim, I don't know your last name, but I know you run Dre's Dungeons. I'm sorry for saying this, man. But I really like to see DeAndre Hunter in a different uniform next year. I don't think it's panned out for what we needed him to be. I don't think you can use the argument of like he needs more time. You know, like I think he is what he is. Whereas John Collins, people I think forget he was the 19th overall pick. Like I think he's kind of just panning out how his career is kind of supposed to pan out. You know what I mean? But a few big plays and key moments where he could be remembered for, but overall isn't ever going to win like a individual award or be all NBA or anything like that. For DeAndre, I'm sure when we drafted him, I was like, dude, this dude could win Defensive Player of the Year one year. Like, so I'm saying like the expectations are different for these two guys. And I think the level of play is very similar for both of them. When they're on, and they're clearly NBA guys and have a lot of talent. And when they're off, they're out there having a cardio session. And it's hard to watch at times. I got to be honest too, like DeAndre, you see it with Kawhi Leonard, and you'll get what the point I'm making is. He's just one of those dudes that's just calm. He's just not emotional. He just, it doesn't seem like he ever really is driven by like he's so pumped up. Trey does it, Dejounte does it, John Collins is, yelling, veins popping out of his neck. Like you don't see DeAndre do things like that often. And it's okay to be a silent killer, if you want to be like Kawhi Leonard and be this baller that doesn't have to be boastful and loud and things like that, that's fine. But, and I get Kawhi isn't the fairest comparison to make, but that's what I'm getting at is that I don't know, man. I as a sports fan, I love dudes that are like really into it, really passionate. And I'm okay if you're quiet as long as you're this silent killer. But if you're this quiet guy who disappears, 1 out of 3 games, if not damn near 2 out of 3 games, it's just gotten to a point where it's like, look, man, again, I'm not wishing you ill will at all. I would really hope you find yourself in a great situation, meaning you don't get shipped off to like Oklahoma City or something. No disrespect to Oklahoma City or the Midwest. But I would hope you'd find himself in a good situation. But at this point, man, I would love to see DeAndre Hunter go. So for sure. When you ask me what could we get in return, if any of our listeners were on the space last night, if you were on the space, there's dozens of guys at this point. You know what I mean? So, Lou Dortz from Oklahoma City, I'd be great with that. Got Jaden McDaniels. I know he got mentioned a bunch. He's young. He could come in, and there's dozens of dudes, man. At this point, I could care less, honestly, who it is. So.
I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but it's the same 2 guys for me. I may throw in Clint Capella there just because I want to see Onyeka Okongwu take over that starting role next year.
Yeah.
In regards to all 3 of those guys too, I think trade value wise, they can still be productive. Now I get it. John's values, his stock has just gone down. I mean, it is what it is. Teams it's how you and I would do business. If the stock's down, I'm gonna say, give it to me the low price. I'm not paying that. So it is what it is. But I still think that they do hold value in the market. Now with DeAndre, I think his contract may be an issue moving. We'll see. And I think it's funny you brought up the lack of emotion because I think yesterday was the first time I've ever seen him be hype about anything. And that was when he had that breakaway dunk. I think it was in the second quarter or third quarter. And again, I totally agree to your point because I haven't seen that in 4 years since being here. But I think the argument with DeAndre, and I heard it on the radio. I forgot which. I thought it was 680 or 92.9. Some caller actually had a really good point. And you want to compare Jason Tatum to DeAndre Hunter? Yeah, they're different players, but they were drafted relatively the same. He's a 3rd overall pick, Jason Tatum, 4th overall pick, DeAndre, and he's in his 6th year and is an MVP candidate. DeAndre is in, I believe this is 5th or 4th year, if you want to correct me. And we're talking about if we should keep the guy or not. That should kind of tell you everything you need to know. When you know you got something, you know you have it. And if you don't, now we're having these type of conversations. So I think those three are probably the most likely to get traded this year. I don't know if it happens again. Their contracts, I mean, John's contract is going to be pretty difficult to move, especially with what has been seen. But, it'll be sad to see those guys go, but it has to be done. I'll be happy to see Onyeka and Jalen getting regular playing time. AJ Griffin crack the rotation as well. I was very impressed with him at the early start of the season. I think, he'll come into his own for the sophomore. In regards to pieces we can get back, you're right. I mean, the NBA we've seen it. Kevin Durant demanded a trade, off a whim, and he was traded and gone within weeks. So, situations change and stuff changes in the NBA all the time. One name that I'm going to throw out there that this would be a dream target scenario for me, and they're kind of going through their own influx, is heading a little north of the border to old Toronto, and Pascal Siakam. If there is any inclination that man is available, especially with the rebuild that they're essentially going through, I don't care what it does to get that man in Atlanta, because he fills a defensive need, fills a forward need, great player, great two-way player.
Man, it's a champion too. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a champion.
Hey, I didn't even
Absolutely.
think of him. I'd take him in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. They gave him a big contract, so we have contracts to match that. Obviously, with John and DeAndre, it's just a matter of the Raptors obviously would get a better offer or not. But, I think that's a name that never gets talked about, especially with the situation they're in. I think Pascal Siakam would be an absolute match made in heaven, dream scenario land for the Atlanta Hawks.
Dude, yeah, I'm going to have to completely agree with you on that one. And real quick, I had to look it up while you were saying it because I was like, I feel like they got to be the exact same size. The Jason Tatum and DeAndre comparison. We're not comparing anybody listening. We're not comparing their production because obviously that's silly. We're comparing where they were drafted, their expectations, what they were supposed to do in the league, and you could even compare. Guess what? Their body types. They are both 6'8", and DeAndre outweighs Jason by 10 pounds exactly. So I'm just saying,
he's even stronger. He's even stronger.
They're the exact same person. They should have at least relatively the same skill set. And like you said, Jason Tatum is an MVP, and DeAndre Hunter is like, oh, what's the best value we could get for him? Like, it's just could not be a more different situation. So, but hey, as Hawks fans, we've joked about it many times on this podcast. That is the life we have been given. So
absolutely, man, absolutely. And just my last thoughts on DeAndre. Listen, if anyone's going to stay on this team or survives, I think DeAndre does have a chance to stay on this team, and maybe with the tutelage of a Quinn Snyder can come into his own. And listen, I don't think you or I or any other Hawks fans have been unreasonable with what we're asking for. Just give us 18 a game consistently. Play your ass off on defense and just play and give us scoring. But like you said, when you're having games where you score 0, 27, 9, 11, like that's just it's hard to get you into a role when you're into that. And that's just not what the NBA is anymore. The parity was so deep in the league this year. There was only 5 teams that I would consider as horrible teams. Other than that, everyone was up until the last 2 weeks was technically in contention with the playoffs. So the league's getting deeper. Players are getting better, and we got to start analyzing that data quicker as a franchise, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, man. Couldn't agree with you more. So yeah, we'll wrap it up on that. I'll say this before we go. Next week's episode probably will be the last one where we're recapping actual games. After that, we will be going into some of our off-season programming. I'm really excited about it. Any of those of you who watched the game last night and watched all of it, they even mentioned what our first episode will be about. In 1988, the Celtics and the Hawks played each other in playoffs. It went 7 games. It was a crazy series. That'll actually be episode 1 of the history of the Hawks. So I'm excited to go over that. There's going to be a lot of history. You might have to take down that Bill Russell jersey in the back. Oh
man, I'll see. I'll move it out of view.
But yeah. So be on the lookout for that, guys. As always, thank you for the support. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, both at HawksFanTV. Check out our website at HawksFanTV.com. That's where you'll find all of our articles and some other cool content as well. I say it every time. Our team of writers, they're incredible. So definitely check out what they got. Check us out on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify podcast, all that. We're on all platforms. So thank you guys for the continued support. And as always, go Hawks.
Go Hawks, baby. Appreciate it, Mac. Catch you on the next one.
Always.